and welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Shirley, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is...
Phil me and Parrish.
Hey, Phil. Oh, what a week we're having for Marvel Comics. Okay. We have a letter, don't we?
Oh, yes.
Yes, I don't want to forget, because I always forget my letters. So let's get the letter in there before I forget it, and then we'll get on to the big, meaty issues out there in the Marvel Comics universe.
All right. So you want me to read it?
Read away.
All right. It's from our friend Kenneth Smyson.
Kenny!
No, Kenny. Hey, guys. After watching the Thor Ragnarok trailer for the 80th time today, I realized that 2017 seems to be the year of the 80s for the MCU. The soundtrack for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is definitely 80s. Spider-Man Homecoming has a John Hughes vibe. And of course, starting in the 80s, Lastly, Thor Ragnarok has an 80s feel to it. The logo font looks like a big hairband design. Is this coincidence? Or are they tapping into something? Last year, Stranger Things proved that the 80s is the time to revisit. And later this year, we get the movie It, although that came out in 1990 technically, but the new It will be set in the 80s following the first half of that story. The second movie will be set in present day with those kids as adults now. I think there's something to it in general. For those of us who were kids in the 80s, like me, our generation is craving the nostalgia for that time. And for many of us, we enjoy showing our kids what our childhood was like. Although I don't have kids of my own, it's a doable win if done well because the kids of today can latch on to the characters. And as we discussed last week, he says, I'd certainly like to hear Stockton Piner join the team. We can overthrow the establishment. Mwahaha. But if I remember correctly, he's reading Inhumans. We've got a show coming up in a few months, but hopefully he'll get on something sooner, like Powerless or Legion. Have a good one, guys. Don't encourage him on Powerless, Kenneth, please.
There's not much more to do, man. Like I said, no one is saying it's getting saved, man. I am the lone voice in the wilderness saying, give this a second season, one more season, and you will see greatness. But no one cares. But you know what? We're going to get Squirrel Girl and the New Warriors, and that's probably going to follow a similar pattern, but because it's Marvel, everyone's going to give it deference. And so, we'll see what happens. Yes, anyway, the 80s. Yeah, the 80s. Nostalgia is the bugaboo of a sated society. We are so well off today that we look back at times that were not objectively better and say, oh, remember when. I believe in progress and forward momentum, even when that progress may look like backwards steps from time to time, as politically it may, but that's the cycle of life, man. Remember in the 80s when we elected that crazy movie actor to lead this country? What a ridiculous notion. It is, outsider candidates. Yay, the 80s. History repeats, and we were all nostalgic for that, going back to a simpler time when we thought some idiot with a good smile and a manufactured persona could lead a nation. But people liked him too, and you know what? I have started saying, you know what? This is the world we're in, and maybe if he actually takes a minute and hires someone who isn't an avowed racist to run the country for him, maybe things will be better. So that's what we're hoping for. But speaking of avowed racists, controversy in X-Men Gold this week. The artist on X-Men Gold, a gentleman by the name of Adrian Said, I believe. Let me just double check that. Adrian Saif. Who, quite frankly, I'm actually hoping he's Jakartan. If he's not Jakartan, it just gets all the more worse. There were some references, subtle references they put into the into the book. X-Men Gold #1. One of which was Colossus wearing a shirt that said QS551, which is a reference to a line in the called Quran Surah 551, that has been directed towards the governor of Jakarta, who is a Christian. The Republic of Indonesia is actually a Muslim country, and there's been a lot of hate towards this guy as being a Christian. It's an interesting. Here's an interesting thing. We in America tend to see ourselves as the default. But what we often forget is that everyone else in every other country sees themselves as the default. So in a Muslim majority country, when a Christian becomes a leader, there is often pushback. And this QS 551 happens to be a line in the Bible, in the Quran, which is one of those Bibles that racists who hate Islam love to trot out. And as it turns out, racists who love Islam love to trot it out too. Because as it turns out, racists, they're the same no matter what they believe. They're all just jerks. Almost said something we can't say on a family show. They're all just jerks. And the line is essentially that, you will not allow a Christian or a Jew to rule over you because they are less than the Muslim, which is weird because actually, oh, there we go. Oh, you who have believed, do not take the Jews and Christians as allies. They are, in fact, allies of one another, and whoever is an ally to them among you, then indeed he is one of them. Indeed, Allah guides not the wrong-doing people. Which is not a Unitarian Universalist principle. Now, quite frankly, most of America is not a Unitarian Universalist country, and these ideas are just as, that's the thing. Here's what I really want to say here. What he did is not acceptable. What his political stance here is not an acceptable American stance. That said, it is not unheard of in the comic books community. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of objectivists in the comic book community. The question is an objectivist superhero who blatantly spouted objectivist ideals. For those unfamiliar, the objectivists are essentially it's a school of philosophy. I don't want to really say founded by Ayn Rand, although we'll say popularized by Ayn Rand, although she might say founded. I mean, she was very proud of her influence on the objectivist thing. She certainly coined their philosophical ideal. And it is this ideal of the individual above all other things, the individual above the state, as teacher Phil Coulson told us was a bad thing. But the fact of the matter is that these ideals often get replayed into very racist, very, very negative views. Mm-hmm. And I think there's probably, I don't know enough about the current Jakartan political scene to know if this guy who got elected governor is a positive or negative influence on Jakarta. So I don't want to defend him, but I will say that when you start taking the most extreme views of a popular group and presenting them, you kind of step across the line, but for what it's worth, that line is not a line that hasn't been crossed in comic books before. There are more than enough people who are, as we've said with Secret Empire, the specter of fascism has always been sitting just below the surface in comic books. And I think to some extent, what this guy did was he put a couple of little winks and nods to his group of fascism that we as a society saw and said, ooh, that's horrible. Even as we ignore all the other winks and nods to fascism throughout so many other books and so many other ways that are just for us because they're in our comfort zone. The ideals of fascism that we're comfortable with. And I said last week, about the question of the inherent fascistic nature of the comic book culture and the comic book society, The fact of the matter is that, when you live in a world with supervillains, fascism is not as frightening a concept compared to supervillainy. You would rather live under a benevolent fascist like Steve Rogers than a less than benevolent fascist like Dr. Doom. Even though Dr. Doom thinks he's very benevolent. The fact of the matter is, he has too much ego to be benevolent. Cap, because he is still the man he always was, believes in the state over the individual, but not to the sacrifice of the goodness of the individual. You have to separate the wheat from the shaft, that there are bad people you have to deal with, but there are also good people that you must protect who may look and talk and act in many ways like the bad people. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is what is the Steve Rogers dynamic in this. Although, again, like we've said from Axel Alonso, he's not supposed to be the good guy. But he may be, in classic Marvel style, gives you a bad guy who is so dang sympathetic, that you almost want to say, oh, well, maybe he's not so bad. I mean, I think they kind of had to push Osborn over the edge because after a while, you're reading what they write about Osborn, like, he's not wrong, And I think that is where, you have this problem. But I do think that there is this. I don't want to defend Adrian Sayev. I think that he definitely crossed the line. And, maybe even unthinkingly. It's sort of. And it's hard to present these ideas when you're talking about a person who isn't of the dominant culture, but I think sometimes you do get this, white privilege moment, even from other people, where they think, oh, it's not a big deal that I'm going to say this because everyone says this. But except everyone doesn't say this, just their subgroup says this, and now they're going to put that out there, and, I think the guy probably just thought of it as kind of a neat joke. But I think that it's, and he actually has said, his career is over. He's not.
Well, like you said, you were saying before that others have done this before. Well, I think it's harder to do it now because I think the way they caught it is people were online started talking. So, that darn internet, you can't sneak anything past them now these days.
Well, not for nothing. I think this is way more about the fact that it was a Muslim idea. Mm-hmm. Than the fact that it was, like I say, the objectivism of the question is so painfully intense when you read any of those old books that you wonder how DC thought this was a good idea to publish these books. I mean, when you go into those things, and to the point that when Alan Moore decided to mock the question with Rorschach, and it's. Although, ironically, that's, of course, the great joke about it, is that Rorschach's supposed to be a parody of the question. And he's supposed to be a guy that you realize right away, oh, he is just such an idiot and such a fascist and such a dangerous man. But, of course, who's the most popular character in Watchmen? It's Rorschach. It's
the same thing. It's like the same thing with, like Archie Bunker. Like, most of us get the joke, but there are those people who don't get, who don't get the joke.
Well, but the thing about Rorschach is that a lot of people didn't get the joke, and it's not just the guys who just, but that's the inherent fascistic nature of comic books. Batman, the question is just Batman, but less subtle. It's the exact same idea. It's the exact same idea of I'm the best there is, and I am the Ubermensch. And so I should be the one making these decisions. Because all of society is corrupted by the fact that lesser people get a say. I mean, and not for nothing, that is the crux of the superhero conundrum. is that when you decide to be a superhero, unless you are the Human Torch who becomes a police officer to serve within the structures of society, you're someone who has said, you know what? The society is so inherently corrupt, I must step outside of society to dominate it. Because I'm the one who knows what is truth and justice and the American way, and everyone else is wrong because they've been corrupted by greed, by avarice, by whatever. I think greed and avarice are actually the same thing, but, they have been corrupted by society. And although that may be a statement that rings true or that gives us some feeling of positivity, it is also a statement that is inherently problematic. It is a statement that is, quite frankly, scary when applied to the larger world in which we live, because it's fine if, it's fine if you're Batman making the choice between good and evil, just as it's fine if you're Captain America making the choice between good and evil, because you are the best of the best. But then again, if a cosmic cube changes you and unleashes something within you, or if the Red Skull brings out something in you, Tony Stark, that isn't what you really always strive towards, suddenly this investment of power in the individual above society is not good. It is the old statement about democracy and capitalism, which is that they are the single worst methods in which to rule a nation, except for every other option. They're not good. They are inherently corrupt, but at least there is some notion of a check on it that is going to prevent them from destroying reality as a whole. They aren't good ideas by a long shot. Democracy is a bad idea. Capitalism is a bad idea. They're just the best bad ideas we've ever come up with. So as we're looking at our bad ideas, it's better that we be a capitalistic democratic society than any of the other stupid ideas we've come up with. Because every other idea we've come up with maybe every once in a while works out great, but mostly ends in a lot of tears and ashes. And so I do think Adrian Saif is probably getting way more flack than he deserves. At the same time, or let me put it to you this way: he's getting more flack than if he had been a white Christian and put some kind of a weird little Christian message in there. I think it would have gotten a little bit much more of a blowover. So, for example, let's say he had put in there let's say he was a Christian. He put in a reference in there to to the first commandment, which is, I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me. That is just as racist and as horrible as this line is. You don't even think about it because we're largely a Christian and Judeo-Christian nation, and even Muslims will say, yeah, I can go along with that. But when you think about how that affects someone who is a Hindu, and the idea that there is this one guy, there is a perception of that is just as controversial, a way to read that is just as controversial, but that would have gotten much less stress in our society. So I do think it was a stupid thing for him to do. I think it was a stupid stance to take, and I absolutely disagree with the stance by making it a religious issue, and then instead of what the actual qualities of this particular politician are. This is a corrupt politician. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know Jakartan politics. He may be, quite frankly, the worst guy out there. I don't know that. But if that's the case, then criticize the actions, not who he is, It's like, quite frankly, when you say, oh, Donald Trump, he's a reality star, and how could we ever elect a reality star? I'll say that because it's a funny joke, like, oh, we elected a reality star. We were elected an actor back in the 80s, again, 80s nostalgia all coming back to us. And Donald Trump, he was coming up in the 80s. it's easy to seize on that, but what's actually problematic about Donald Trump isn't what he did for a living. It's the policies or the lack of policies that he's putting forth today. If you're going to disagree with Donald Trump, disagree with him on his policies. If you don't like his policies, say, I don't like that policy, and then say that. If you like say, well, I think he can do better on this and he can do better than that. That's politics. But the fact of the matter is that when you attack someone on something that is not intrinsically a problem, unless you're having a prejudiced opinion on the subject, then you're missing the point. And I think he misses the point here. And I think it got big because, you know what? He is a Muslim in a Christian nation, a nation full of Christians, and not for nothing, a nation full of people who aren't Muslims. Because that's the thing. If you're not of the group, you are going to find yourself on the outs. And that, of course, makes for an interesting point just to segue into something else, about the Ghost in the Shell doing well in Japan. Not as well as probably Scarlett needed, but to maintain her blockbuster status. But it's not, whitewashing doesn't hurt you in Japan. But the reason why whitewashing doesn't hurt you in Japan is because Japan has a lot of Asian actors already on TV and movies. That's the thing. It's like you go to Japan, it's like pretty much all Japanese actors, all doing Japanese TV and movies in the news. There's not this overwhelming quality of white actors in your face all the time. So when a white actor shows up in a movie, it's not particularly disconcerting for them. It's not problematic that, that was an Asian role that could have gone to someone, because there's a lot of Asian roles in Japan. Now, granted, you won't get paid as much as you get for doing Scarlett Johansson's job in Ghost in the Shell, but for the movie-going audience, that's much less of a concern than what they actually experience in their day-to-day life. So anyway, that is that. I don't want to talk too much about this. The guy, I hope the guy gets a second act, because I always hope everyone gets a second act. Third acts, I don't necessarily believe in, but second acts, absolutely. And, although honestly, I don't know how good an artist he was from the start. Well, that's not bad. Although you can never tell unless you do your own inks, because, it's always the inks that make the art. Okay, let's move on from there. Let's talk about the other big story right now. Do you know what the other big story is, Phil?
I'm sure I'll remember as soon as you say. What is it?
Apple.
Oh, yes. Big
that is the
story.
Yeah, that is the $1 trillion question. It is said Apple is looking at Disney. Now, here's what I'm going to say about this. And why I think you're getting this right now. Because I don't think in any other business climate could a Disney-Apple merger ever go through. I think that a Disney-Apple merger is only possible with the most liberal view toward, and I use liberal in the actual definition of the word liberal, meaning free, the most liberal view towards corporations.
Mm-hmm.
That if anyone but Trump was president, honestly, I think that even if Marco Rubio was president, a Disney-Apple merger would be a no-go. Just right from the start. Because it is the idea of merging one of the biggest content providers with one of the most exclusivist manufacturers of content reader. You know what I mean?
Yeah, anyone else be calling monopoly, right?
Well, it's a completely vertically integrated structure of of two of the most powerful entities. That's not good. That is freaking Rockefeller. I'm going to charge you to ship my competitor's oil. Kind of monopolistic behaviors. So I don't think it's going to go through. I think even Trump is going to have a hard time putting an Apple-Disney merger through. Because as much as people might think, it's the mouse and the apple, aren't they cute? I think enough people who are cognizant of how economically devastating that would be for both companies. Because here's what I'm gonna tell you: if Apple buys Disney, that will be essentially the destruction of both Disney, Marvel, and everything about that. Okay, that merger is going to be horrific. I mean, honestly, who's going to rejoice are the Warner fans, the Disney people or the DC people, because they're going to like, okay, at least now we know that Disney is now no longer a threat, because they're going to be locked into a certain world, the Apple world. So I myself, as a Marvel fan, intentionally reject Apple. I will not go to Apple because they're not an open source company, they're not a company that works with others well. You know, I like Android, I like PCs because they're about creating structures for a uniform language. Apple is about an exclusivist language on exclusivist machines. I don't trust that. I don't trust giving anyone that much power. And so I really do not want to see Apple Disney get together. Honestly, I think Disney is going to be smart enough to avoid it. I think Disney's going to say, no, we don't want to be part of Apple. And now they say Apple's got the cash to make it worth Disney's while. And in a short-term answer, that might work, but I think that if anyone is smart, Disney and Apple merging is the worst thing ever. That's my opinion. Phil, do you have a counter statement on it?
I could see that, but I mean, I remember when Disney came and bought Marvel. Yeah, it's a much smaller scale, but I remember people saying, "Oh, this is horrible." You know, now that Disney bought Marvel, it's not going to be as violent, or you know, they're going to censor all this stuff. But hey, you still got the Punisher, you still got all this, you know.
Yeah, well, no, okay, first off, people who said that didn't know anything about Disney, because Disney had been producing violent and adult works for years under the Touchstone banner. You know, Disney is not one thing. The difference between that is Disney is a content provider. Marvel is a content provider. And it's about consolidation of a certain brand of content. And yes, you can say that's monopolistic towards content, except for the fact that there are other equally viable, though not as good, content providers over at DC and other comic books and other movie houses. You know, they did not have exclusivity. They had intellectual properties that they were able to own and exploit. And that's why it was a good merger, and that's why it wasn't a monopoly. Because they can make as many Spider-Man t-shirts as they want, but they can't make Superman t-shirts. And Superman t-shirts do sell. Green Lantern I used to have a Green Lantern t-shirt, you know. Even though I didn't read the book, I still loved Green Lantern because I liked his other ancillary properties. But the point is that when you merge a device manufacturer with a content provider and create a situation in which an exclusivity of content can be moved solely through a device provider, you create an unfair monopolistic structure. Now, granted, yes, you know, Samsung can still stream DC films, but, you know, is that going to be necessarily enough to compete with what Disney, Apple, Marvel would do? And for what it's worth, I don't think Apple is a smart enough company to be someone that can I actually don't think Apple has very long in the industry. I know I'm an outsider on that, but I think Apple's basic business structure is one of exclusivity in a market that is based on interchangeability. And I know this every time my friend who has an iPhone, I have to go and get her that dang freaking Apple charger, which is more expensive than a freaking micro USB, because micro USBs are universal, and Apple doesn't use them. And that's the thing. Apple has a structure that says we make our own thing and we are different. And, you know, for what it's worth, you can have that fact that they have that high quality standard, and that was Edison's argument always, But the fact of the matter is that Edison's commitment to that quality allowed other companies to grow up and provide content so that Edison never had a monopoly on content.
Mm-hmm.
You have Apple buying a major content provider. It's either going to kill Apple because they spent too much on an asset that still no one wants to buy Apple products. Because they're not interchangeable and they can't get a mass market item to the populace. Or it's going to kill Disney because they're not going to be able to get their product to the populace, and their product isn't necessarily their content anymore. It's their ancillary rights. You know, Disney makes princess movies to sell princess toys, not to sell tickets to princess movies. They like making money off princess movies, but, you know, here's what I'll always say. You know, Ghost in the Shell losing money because they spent too much on Ghost in the Shell is a problem because there isn't a demand for Ghost in the Shell merchandise. There's no Ghost in the Shell Happy Meal toy. Let alone a Ghost in the Shell t-shirt that my kid's going to wear, because my kids have no idea who Ghost in the Shell is. And it's not something that is integrated into something that's strong and viable in that way. Captain America is. But if suddenly you can't get Captain America on Kindle, if you can only get Captain America on an iPad, you can only watch Captain America on your iTV, I'm not buying an iTV. Most Americans aren't going to be able to buy an iTV. And you're going to damage the property.
Yeah, but do you really think they would sabotage themselves like that and only make it exclusive to Apple products?
Oh, of course they would. They're not that smart. You know, I mean, that's the thing. Business people aren't very smart people. If they were smart, they'd be creating things. Instead, they're selling things. They're selling things that other people create. So they hire someone to create something to sell, and that's great until you find yourself in a position where people don't want to buy the thing that was created because you're making a choice on it that isn't helping the sales. You know, I mean, no, it's like this. I can download iTunes onto my Samsung, I believe, you know, and I can get these things. But you know what? The fact of the matter is that the fact that they, you know, and maybe that's just my old fuddy-duddy nature that I don't trust Apple in that way. Ever since I gave everyone U2, I don't trust them. Yeah, I didn't trust them long before that. I just think it's a bad idea for Apple to buy Disney. I think that companies need to know what they do. I think the most important thing in business is to know what you do. You know, what Disney does, and just to give you an example, what Disney does is Disney licenses products. Disney is a licensing company for iconic characters. And yeah, but that's how you make your money. And so everything else they do, it's all about, can you make something we can sell to someone else to make a product? Because Disney doesn't make toys, but Hasbro makes toys, and Hasbro wants to make Disney toys. You know, Mattel likewise. Everybody wants to do it. And they're all going to get into this bidding question to say, can we make your toys? And you don't see Disney going out buying a toy manufacturer. Because Disney knows they don't want to be the guy that makes the toys. They want to be the guy that makes their money on the front end, licensing the toys. Much in the way that Marvel kind of wanted to be the guy on the front end, licensing their characters to movie houses. It was only when a movie house bought them that it's like, now it got to be problematic. But quite frankly, it was a solid business model beforehand, you know? Even though the people who bought their movies often screwed them up, except for Blade. Blade was good. But yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. And I don't think the Disney Marvel Apple merger is a good idea. We're going to have to see what happens. I'm hoping someone along the line is smart enough to say, no, stop, don't do it. But that's my hope. Okay, Phil, what else is there to talk about? Oh, do you have anything else to say on that subject?
No, I think we're good on that. I was going to say, I don't think we discussed the Thor Ragnarok trailer here. I know we discussed it on our takeover of Enough Said, but yes. I don't think we discussed it here.
Okay, so Thor Ragnarok. Good trailer.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic trailer. Worrisome trailer, as I said on Enough Said, expressly because it's a lot of whiz bang, but we got no story. And we know there's a bunch of other stories because there's a whole subplot with Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
We know there's something going on with Odin. We know that people are cast out. Yeah.
I mean, I know these days a lot of trailers give away like the whole story, but I mean, don't you want that surprise? Isn't that what trailers were originally meant to be? Like whet your appetite and.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. That's what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But we did recently have our Suicide Squad conundrum, where they made it look like a Joker movie, and it weren't no Joker movie. Mm-hmm. Now, honestly, I was less worried about the fact that it wasn't a Joker movie than I was just about the fact that it was only a passable movie. Better than Batman v Superman, but definitely they sold us on something that wasn't the crux of the film. Mm-hmm. And I do think by selling us on the gladiatorial moment of Hulk and Thor, that people are going to go into this and say, oh, that was like, 5 minutes in this movie. Mm-hmm. And not for nothing, I honestly think it is going to be 5 minutes in this movie. Because clearly here's the entire plot of the film. Spoilers. Mm-hmm. Plot of the film is... Hela comes to Asgard. Hela destroys Asgard, disperses people, drops Odin out on Earth as a homeless guy, kicks Loki off to somewhere. Well, actually, Loki might have been the one who threw. Although we actually see Loki prepared for battle, flipping knives. So something's going on here. But basically, Hela does that. Thor winds up in the property of the Grand Master. He fights Hulk. Hulk and him buddy, and then they beat up everyone else, and then they have a road trip back home. And they get back to Earth where they meet Doctor Strange, and things happen from there. I think most of the film is not going to be this whiz bang that we got, and that is the worrisome quality of it. It's not necessarily a bad quality of it, but it is a worrisome quality of it.
Yeah, but isn't that like the business of movies though? You want to sell tickets, and I mean, how exciting of a trailer is going to be is if it's guys sitting around talking for 2.5 minutes, and two, you're going to give away part of your plot that way too.
Well, this is true too. Like I said, I'm not saying it's going to be a bad film. I'm saying looking at the trailer and saying that's what the film is the mistake. And so I still think it's going to be a good film. I think this is going to be, well, I think it's definitely going to be the best Thor film. When Thor says, "I know him from work," it's a great, funny line, but it's also a weird line. You know what I mean?
That struck me weird too. I was like, yeah, that's very funny, but I was like, Thor doesn't talk like that? That sounds like more like a Tony Stark line or something.
Well, here's what's interesting. There's been this suggestion. There's the thing about Thor and his roommate.
Yeah.
And there's the suggestion that that's actually canon.
And
it's an interesting idea within Marvel. This idea that no, it's all canon. That the Marvel Universe can exist on multiple levels, and that there is going to be these things that are not just hyper-realistic superheroics, that, there is this quality that Thor hangs out with people. And the fact of the matter is Thor hanging out with people is how he's been depicted up until now, Like when they're doing the whole thing about, lifting the hammer, and he says, or the simple answer is, you're all not worthy, in Age of Ultron. That's who Thor is. He's kind of a jokester and kind of a fun guy. That's where they're going with that. So,
I thought his father taught him humility. Come on.
He has humility. I'm a humble guy too, but I still like to crack wise.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that like when you come into it, it's like Thor sees the Hulk and he's like, oh, it's my old friend the Hulk. I'm not going to worry about this. He's worried about what they're putting him against, because he's, overwhelmed. He's lost his hammer. He's in the thing, and they say, "Oh," and he says, "Yes," and they're like, "Why is he saying yes?" He's like, "I know him. He's a friend. I know him from work." Well, then you see that the Hulk ain't playing. This ain't kayfabe Thor. He's gonna go throw in. So then Thor has to go beat the heck out of the Hulk. So they're gonna have a nice little throwdown, which will be fun. But that's not going to be the arc of the film. That is one scene. I still think it'll be better than Suicide Squad, but I do think that there are reasons to have worries about it. That's all I ever say, And you remember, I worried about Ant-Man 2, and that made a lot of money. So, Other thing dropped today, the trailer for Last Jedi. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Well, it's got Jedis in it, so I was not horribly impressed. I will say I was not horribly impressed by it. I wasn't as impressed as I was by Thor Ragnarok, but I'm less of a Star Wars fan. I mean, I like Star Wars a lot, but it's not like I sit there. I say live long and prosper. I don't say may the force be with you. But it looks good. It looks neat. I'm sure it's going to be a great film. I'm sure I will enjoy it. Did you have any more passionate views on the Last Jedi trailer?
I'm probably like you. I'm not that. I mean, I like Star Wars, but I'm not as big a fan as some people. But I just wonder if in this movie we're gonna get more into like, I don't know, like the metaphysical nature of like the Force and like the Jedi and Luke drops that line about like ending the Jedi. I just wonder if Luke's seeing like the Jedi as like, ruining too many the Jedi Order ruining too many lives, at least in his opinion.
Well, you know what? And this is something I've always said, is that I've always felt like the problem with the Jedi was that, and this is this idea about the prophecy of balance of the Force, that Vader would bring balance to the Force. Mm-hmm. And the idea that you need to find balance to the Force suggests that the Force users currently active in the universe are not balanced. That both the Jedi and the Sith are equally wrong in their understanding of the Force, even as they fight. Mm-hmm. Each thinking that each one is right, but clearly if you need to find balance in the Force, then clearly both are wrong. And I think what you may be finding with what's her name?
Rey.
Rey is that she is actually the one born of the Force.
Mm-hmm.
That she was the one born of the Force on the desert world. That people thought it was Vader. And maybe Vader is part of the prophecy too. Maybe it is a cyclical prophecy. Maybe that each person born of the Force in every age has the potential to bring balance to the Force, if they can avoid the corruption that has led to the corruption of each variant theme. It is possible that perhaps Yoda too was once thought to be the chosen, but that Yoda then fell into the opposite side and became the advocate of the Jedi Order, that the Order of the Jedi is the way, and denial of self is the only way to true enlightenment. But of course, denial of self can be no more accurate than embrace of self, because as Roman Catholicism teaches us, we are not merely spirit, and we are not merely flesh. We are spirit and flesh made one. We are the earth infused with the Spirit of God, and it is in that balance of spirit and flesh that true enlightenment evolves. And so I got to go through some props to Catholicism, because I'm a Catholic and it's Easter. But that is the idea. That is the idea, that we are both spirit and flesh. That there isn't just one or the other. We are not a spirit. We're not a ghost living in a meat body. We are both the meat and the higher thought. And only by finding balance and peace within both can you truly move on. And I think the Jedi Order becomes too much in the, when you when you study chakras and ideas, there's like, your base chakras and your higher chakras. And you can be all focused on your higher chakras, but your base chakras still exist. You can be all focused on your base chakras, but your higher chakras still exist. And it is about moving along the full line of your energy centers that you can find enlightenment. You don't just go to the crown chakra to touch the infinity and think you are enlightened. It is not just that. It is binding the infinity to the base and moving between that enlightenment can come. And I think that's what perhaps Rey does. I think Rey is that savant, that Jedi savant who has the potential to bring balance to the Force in the way that Vader did, in the way that perhaps Luke did. Or even maybe Leia did at some point. Maybe all of these people had that thing. And maybe, for what it's worth, just to be a little Freudian here, perhaps the one that has to find it has to be a woman. Because the domineering patriarchal society of that galaxy's culture limits the ability of men in that world to find solace and peace. Perhaps, there is this idea that there's a genetic predisposition towards patriarchy because it is beneficial for a male, that genetically speaking, the male can populate his genome much further than a female can. Ergo, even a female would want to create a society in which her male offspring has a stronger beneficial structure. But if you create this structure that is based on this idea of a male dominance, that perhaps a male is as much disadvantaged by his dominance towards finding a greater enlightenment than as he is empowered by it. It's there's a great I'm forgetting. Oh, I believe it's called The Elephant Hunt by George Orwell, which is a great short story about George Orwell's time while he was serving in India. About the Mask of the Conqueror, and everybody wears these masks, and everyone has these roles that they have to play. Everyone, demands you do this and demands you do that. Both the conqueror and the oppressed have these structures in place. And it's an interesting take. George Orwell is a very fantastic author. I highly recommend, if you ever want to read a nice short story that'll make you think, read The Elephant Hunt by George Orwell. George Orwell is one of those great plain-spoken writers, much like Stephen King, who really just, as soon as he puts word on a page, just draws you into the story. It's really great. Okay, but that's my thought on Star Wars. You have anything else you want to add tonight, Phil?
No, I think those are the big stories of the week.
Yeah, those are the big stories of the week. Steve Rogers is right. Osborne is right. Fascism is the way to go in the superhero universe. But aside from that, unless you actually believe that humans should have self-determination, in which case you have to find a balance between the spirit and the flesh and tie it all back together. That's called a night, Phil. Phil, if someone wants to talk to you and ask why you put up with my inane ranting every week, how can they empathize and sympathize with you?
If you want to know about the greatest Jedi of all, Charlie Esser, you could always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am @nightwingpdp. You can find all my podcasts and blogs at philparrish.wordpress.com.
Yes, and ladies and gentlemen, please read Phil's writing. I may seem like a deep-thoughted intellectual, but honestly, I just talk well. Phil writes amazing articles that if you've ever wanted to know Marvel or DC, anything that is worth reading, read it from Phil. Phil, I may be the professor, but as I say, Phil fills me in. Phil has the deep dive knowledge, and Phil really knows what he's talking about, and it's always worth the read. So read Phil's stuff. And of course, if you just want to hang out with me and goof off like I do, you can write to me in that old-fashioned email way at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, just like the name of this podcast with blog at the end at gmail.com. And of course, follow me on the Twitters at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's right there in the middle for quality. Phil, you gotta mute when you start moving that chair.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, man. No, you got a really powerful mic, and it picks up everything.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think you gotta like go to I think that's probably a great mic when you have like 6 people in the room. I think you need like a much more directional mic. I think you have an omnidirectional, you gotta go much more directional.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought, because I'm always yelling at my kids to quiet down as I do podcasts.
Know. Those of us who listen to the Iron Cast know that.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. By the way, those are just clicks. I'm not hitting my kids in that. There's no hitting going on. It's like, oh, my God, it sounds like I'm hitting him. And it's like, no.
Snap his finger.
Yeah, I do snap. No, I do that because that's what I do. Because I find kids respond to that. You, like, snap your finger. You just go, and the kids, like, look up and they go, whoa, what? Okay. It's, neat trick I learned. It's actually I learned it.
Gives kids the finger.
Yeah, Cesar Millan does it with dogs, and that's basically how you train them. everything I learned about raising children, I learned from South Park. You got to be the dominant in the relationship, and snapping your fingers is a way that you have the kid look at you and acknowledge you are the dominant, you are the alpha. So that's how you raise children, apparently.
That's right, Mr. Hat.
Yes. Anyway. But yes. So I have no idea what I'm saying now. Okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for connecting with us. Please connect with us again.